What's going on, everyone? Welcome to episode 6 of the Nati pod. I'm your host, Ryan Townsend. Thank you so much for joining me today as I look to preview the Bengals and Browns game coming up this Sunday. I usually do an article for games like this, but I decided let's start doing some podcasts with a preview and see what we got rolling here. So very special guest today, my pitching coach and recruitinator at Wilmington College, Coach Ferenchek, Jared Ferenchek, a diehard Cleveland fan, big Indians, big Browns, big Cavs fan. Really knows sports, and looking forward to having him on the show today. Jared, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me, Ryan. Excited to talk some Browns Bengals with you.
Yes, sir. Looking forward to the game. Hopefully, still going to be a close game like last time, but hopefully get something rolling for both teams here after struggling last week. So how we're going to do this preview today is we're going to work it like my article. So what I do in my article is I write a little bit of information, some press conferences, a little injury report here and there. And then I go down from what to expect, which is the keys to the game, basically, bring down a prediction, and then we do a little bold prediction. So we're going to start with some info today from the Browns. Jared, looked like Baker Mayfield was a little banged up this week. Looked like you guys had a lot of injuries on defense. Is there anything to report from there? Any big information that Bengals fans need to know this week?
Nothing major. I know Coach Stefanski said that Baker is actually practicing more this week than he was last week. So he's a lot more limited that last week than he was this week. As far as our secondary goes, our two starting safeties are still banged up. Harrison is going through concussion protocol right now. He kind of remains day to day. And Carl Joseph is probably unlikely to play again this week as well. As far as injury front, that's pretty much sums it up. As far as what we're dealing with. So just really our back end of our secondary is still been our weak spot all year. Remains to be a weak spot. I think that will be until we continue to get healthy and get our guys back on the field. So.
Yeah, it's what I was noticing a little bit. I noticed a little bit, like talking about Baker with his injury. I know he got banged up a little bit in an Indy game, banged up a little bit in that Steelers game, got taken out a little bit. Saying he practiced a little bit more, so you think there's no chance that Keenum plays this week and they're wanting to go with Baker? Because I've seen some reports that they might want to save Baker and play Keenum next week going into the Raiders game. Do you think Baker 100% plays this week?
I do. I think this is a big bounce back week for him after especially last week's performance. I think that going forward, these next few weeks are very important, crucial for him in his development because obviously, when we play high caliber teams competition this year. We've been overmatched in both games. So this is a big bounce back week for Baker. And I think we'll bounce back as a team too.
Yeah, I hope the Bengals can bounce back a little bit too from that 21-point lead we had, a little deficit there. For the Bengals on this side of the injury front, nothing really major to report. We know Sam Hubbard's on the reserve injured list. Mike Daniels is actually activated today from that list. So he's 21 days free, able to come back to practice. On the Bengals side, actually, without these injuries, there's a lot of news about the team per se and seeing if Zach Taylor can maintain the locker room. Geno Atkins and Carlos Dunlap have came out this week and both expressed their frustrations with playing time. John Ross actually asked for a trade yesterday, reported by NFL Network's Mike Garofalo. Kind of interesting because I don't know what suitor the Bengals would have and what we could get for him. He really hasn't progressed a whole lot for us, not really able to catch a ball, run a little sloppy routes at the beginning of his career. And actually reported by Jeremy Fowler off ESPN, there's a possible A.J. Green trade coming if they could find a possible suitor for him. So I'm looking forward to seeing that, see what goes down there. And then Marcus Hunt, former second-round pick from the Bengals in 2013, re-signed with us today to help out a little bit on defensive line struggles. So hopefully we can get something figured out there. Hopefully Geno and Dunlap can get more incorporated in the game plan and see where we go from there. Because obviously big bounce back week. Would really love to be 2-3-1 coming in this game, but 1-4-1 is a little hole to dig ourselves out of. So moving on to our next phase is the what to expect. So in my articles, I break it down with offense and defense. So we're going to start with Coach Ferenchek here. So specifically on the Browns offensive side of the football, what do they have to do to really have a big game against the Bengals defense?
I think just stick to our formula that we've had this year in all the games he won, which is run the ball early, establish a run, and then just let Baker kind of settle in and do some play action. Stefanski's really drawn up some really good game plans this year. But it all depends if we can establish a run early, kind of dominate that line of scrimmage, which we've been able to do, obviously, for the most part. Missing Nick Chubb, that is still a big loss. I've noticed that the last couple of weeks, our run game has not been nearly as effective. And one of our starting guards was out last week as well, too. So if we can get him back this week, which hopefully I think we should, establish Kareem Hunt early, kind of let Baker settle in, get a lead first two. That's very important for us because we are not a come from behind team at all. The more Baker has to throw the ball when we're down, that is not a recipe for success for us. So
Yeah.
just really get the lead early, establish a run is definitely a big key for our offense.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with that. So bouncing a little bit back to you here on the side of Baker Mayfield and his connection with his receivers. I watched a little bit of the Pittsburgh game. Wasn't pretty. He threw 2 interceptions, one of them pick six to Minka. What have you seen so far with Baker and the chemistry and his wide receivers? Obviously, I know he likes his tight ends. Stefanski's a big 12 personnel guy, bringing in Harrison Bryant, Austin Hooper. He's got a connection there with those guys. What have you seen from the connection outside with Beckham, Landry in the slot? Is it good chemistry? Is it bad? Does he still need to get those guys the ball more to really incorporate them into the offense?
Yeah, I think the chemistry is getting better week by week. It's tough because Baker is not reading defenses real well right now. When he goes through his progressions, if that first option is not there, he panics in the pocket and the play breaks down. He ends up scrambling out. Nothing good comes out of that. So I really think it's a lot on Baker. Our receivers most of the time get separation. He just either doesn't see them or has the wrong read. So really, I think a lot of it's on Baker. He has to continue to get better at that. I don't know how much better you can get better at that, especially now during the season. But obviously, if he can practice this week, that's the best place to work on that. And obviously in the film room as well, reading defenses, especially against you guys, your defense.
Yeah, absolutely. So bouncing it my way a little bit to the Bengals defense. Remember from game 2, obviously they had the two-headed monster and Chubb and Hunt. This game, they're only going to have Hunt. I think a big key for our defense here is, like you were talking about, you want to get the run going. We've got to be able to stop the run, knowing it's just Hunt and Ernest Johnson. Really got to limit their progressions here throughout the game and really limit the big plays from them. I think another big thing, too, what I was talking about is with the connection at the tight ends. I remember week 2 that there were a lot of third and longs, third and mediums that we got you guys in. I remember your tight ends with Hooper and sometimes Bryant really were able to get you guys to push the sticks. Von Bell was having trouble guarding Austin Hooper. A couple of crossing routes here and there. We really were mixing up. And it reminds me of this last week where Darius Phillips, Von Bell, they had trouble covering Trey Burton and Jack Doyle of the Colts. Now, Mo Alley-Cox, Philip Rivers' almost favorite tight end target, he was out. But he was looking more tight end with Doyle and Burton. Couldn't get anything going with T.Y. Hilton. We really struggle with the tight ends. I think if we can really limit the tight end play this week and really stop them with that, because obviously Odell and Jarvis, we've had trouble containing those guys, but those guys are tough to contain. I mean, OBJ is the top 10 receiver in the league. Jarvis, one of the better slot guys in the league. We know they're going to have those big plays here and there, but I think really limiting the run game and limiting the tight ends and their effectiveness there is really going to help us out. So picking it back up to you, we're going to go back to your defensive side. You said you had some injuries this past week that probably, accounted for that big blowout loss against Pittsburgh. So what do you guys have to do on defense, injury plagued? What do you guys have to do on defense to really limit Joe Burrow, who threw the ball 61 times against you guys last time, and stop Joe Mixon here? And what do you guys really need to focus on this week?
Really, easier said than done, attack your weakness, which obviously is your offensive line. So get as much pressure as possible early. Make Burrow feel uncomfortable, force him out of the pocket, make throws on the run, things like that. I feel like last time we played you guys in week 2, we let him sit in the pocket a little too much. He had too much time. Obviously a good quarterback like that, he's gonna get some yards, get some touchdowns, put points on the board. So really, I think we just need to get pressure from the start. Whether that's stacking the box, whether that's, putting Myles Garrett, moving him around the line, shifting him over different guys. Whatever it really needs, whatever it needs to take to be effective. I think, I think Joe Woods has put together a good game plan in most games this year so far on the defensive side of the ball. It just, that last kind of secondary part again, it kind of breaks down at the end, even if we do get pressure. So really, if we're not going to get a lot of sacks, knockdowns, things like that, we got to force Burrow out of the pocket. So.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. He's had really struggled scrambling this year. He's wanting to extend plays, really make the big plays, and he's had trouble throwing it away a little bit. So hopefully he can progress with that. Picking it back up to you, actually, real quick, made me think of something here before I go to the Bengals offense. Myles Garrett. So far, from what I've seen this year, obviously he had a suspension last year that hurt him in his last couple games. So far, from what I've seen this year, he's been a beast. Where would you put Myles Garrett right now in the Defensive Player of the Year running?
I'd put him right up there, pretty much with anyone. I know people mentioned T.J. Watt. They mentioned some other names like that, but I think as far as a pure edge rusher, I think he is one of the best, if not the best, in the league. Every game, he makes an impact play or two that changes the game in the end. And even when he's not getting sacks, he's either getting double teamed or he's creating pressure somewhere else for someone else to get to the quarterback or make a play in the backfield. So his impact overall on the team every week, it shows. It may not show in the stat sheet, but it shows throughout the course of the game.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree with that. And that's one of my big things this week with the offense. Obviously, we want to get Joe Burrow going a little bit, get his passing game going. I think his last 4 or 5 games, he's thrown for over 300 yards. So really want to put it in much of Burrow's hands as possible. But we also want to make sure we're protecting him. If we've got to double team Garrett, if we got to get a chip block with Mixon, something like that. Because I remember him and one of your other defensive ends really roughed him up that game, only having 3 sacks, so it wasn't too hateful. But the pressure on that game in game 2, all night long, Burrow had no time to throw, but he was able to make plays. If we can really protect him a little bit this week and really limit the effect of Myles Garrett, I think it's going to help too. And another thing that really we haven't been able to get going a little bit, it's here and there, but Joe Mixon, as he's known as the Cleveland killer a little bit, last couple of games he's played Cleveland, you guys have really had trouble stopping him. And except for week 2, obviously we didn't have a run game. Joe Burrow threw the ball 61 times. But if we can get Joe Mixon going a little bit in the running and passing game on top of T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, A.J. Green came out to play a little bit last week, 8 receptions, 96 yards. Just getting him back in the mix a little bit. And if we can add Mixon and some possible tight end production here, I think can really help us down the line. So hopefully we can get that going a little bit. I know Mixon's been yearning to get some yards going a little bit, really balance our offensive attack here, but we'll see where we go from that. So
if I could just jump in here real quick.
Go right ahead.
I noticed the last few weeks, T. Higgins has really emerged as a top guy, at least from what I've seen. How do you think he'll fit into the game plan this week for you guys?
So from what I've seen so far, it looks like AJ is more of himself with just being in the slant and in-breaking route. From what I've seen from T. Higgins, though, the opposite of AJ Green, I think he's going to be our deep ball threat. Had a good conversation with Joe Goodberry on Twitter a couple of days ago talking about the difference with AJ and T. And he compared T. Higgins right now to being our AJ Green, almost like our number 1 target, our number 1 deep ball threat. And because you can see Burrow's really trying to incorporate him in the game plan, throwing into the tight windows, getting him on some crossing routes, getting him on the deep ball. So I think in the game plan, he fits in the deep ball scheme a little bit and really one of his go-to guys in certain situations, big 3rd down play, big 4th down play. I think he's slowly starting to emerge as our number 1 receiver. So hopefully he can live up to what I'm saying, because last week's deep ball I thought was a little bit of emergence there. But I'm hoping, he's able to get something going against you guys this week. So prediction time here. For this week's game, the Browns are favored by 3.5 points. Over under is 50 for all you gamblers out there. Jared, what do you see as the final score of this game and why?
I'm thinking 27-23 Browns. I think that the difference will be early on in the game if we can limit Joe Burrow and the Bengals offense to some field goals in the red zone. I think that's definitely key. I do think that we will come out and start fast, especially after last week's performance. We got down early, big hole, couldn't climb out of. So I I think this week is definitely important to start fast. And I think, like I said before, if we can establish that run, I think we'll be able to put some points up on the board this week.
Okay, I like the prediction a little bit. I'm actually going to go the opposite of you. Go figure. I've got the Bengals winning 30-28. From what I've seen the last 2 weeks with both teams, I think the Bengals offense is really starting to find itself. And after getting out to that 21-point lead last week against Indy, really showed what the offense can be and what we can do when we have a balanced attack and really want to move the ball up the field. I think it's going to be a high-scoring game. I think both offenses are going to be working well. But I also think with both defenses injury-plagued and limited a little bit, I think it's going to be a long day when both teams are on defense. So I've got the Bengals winning a close one here, 30-28 at Paul Brown Stadium. I see him jumping out to an early lead, possibly giving it up here and there like the Colts game. But I see him jumping back in front of the 12,000 home crowd fans. But I see a Bengals win here, and hopefully we can get something going in the right direction. So now, final segment here of the show. What I do in my articles is I go a bold prediction. I usually go one for offense and one for defense. So, Jared, bold prediction for the Browns, one on offense, one on defense. What do you think?
On offense first, I think OBJ is going to have 150-plus yards receiving this week with 2 touchdowns. I think after a very disappointing week last week for him and really the team overall, I think this is a big bounce-back week. He had a lot of success week 2 against you guys, especially on the deep ball. So I think one of those plays is in store again for this week. I really think that getting him the ball early and involved is going to help him go a long way this week.
I gotcha. Anything for the defense? Any bold prediction there for the defense?
I wouldn't say a bold prediction, but I think that we will win the turnover margin at least +2. Okay. We are actually 6th right now in the NFL in plus turnover margin. We were higher, but after last week's performance, we slipped a little bit. But so far on this year on defense, that is what has won us some games due to our lack of secondary play is winning the turnover battle. Right. So I think that is a big, big key for us to continue to do that.
Okay. Yeah. I can definitely see that with the turnover margin, a little hurt last week against Pittsburgh. So this week for me, though, bold prediction for the offense, A.J. Green is going to catch 2 touchdown passes. Now, I saw a bright spot last week against Indianapolis. Obviously, he hasn't found the end zone yet, but 8 receptions for 96 yards. I think if they're able to get in the red zone a little bit more and they're able to get the pass game going a little bit like they did last week, I think with his in-cutting routes and his slants or maybe, a back shoulder fade, I think he's going to be one of those red zone targets that Joe Burrow needs to look for. So I've got A.J. Green catching 2 touchdown passes this week. And something really bold, I think, that Bengals fans might get me on. I think we sack Baker Mayfield 4 times. Now, that is a really bold prediction in the sense that if you were a Bengals fan and you watched last week, Lou Anarumo did not bring any pressure against Philip Rivers. We had 1 sack. But I think with Baker being banged up a little bit, I think Lou and the defensive staff find it in them to bring pressure. A couple safety blitzes with Bates worked last week, bringing Wilson and Pratt and Davis Gaither on a couple blitzes. Really pressured Phillip a little bit, but for the most part, we really didn't pressure him. But I think with the lack of the offensive line in Cleveland, and I think with Baker being banged up a little bit and having Case Keenum come in last week, I think we're going to get pressure on him a little bit. I think we're going to be able to sack Baker Mayfield 4 times. Any thoughts on that, Jared?
It's funny you mentioned that. Last year, I think it was week 16, we played you guys. You guys sacked Baker 6 times. Now I know our offensive line is a lot better this year. It has shown.
Absolutely.
But if you do get some pressure on him early, I think that's definitely going to cause some trouble for us.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to seeing it. Hopefully these bold predictions pan out. I actually haven't had one bold prediction pan out. Last week I predicted Rodrigo Blankenship would have a field goal blocked. That didn't happen. Obviously, he was perfect. And then we would hold Jonathan Taylor to under 50 rushing yards. I think he ended up with like 65. So it was close. One of these weeks, though, my bold predictions are going to hit. I'm telling you that. One of these bold predictions, whether it's AJ this week, Baker, or in the coming weeks, one of these bold predictions is going to hit. So
well, I don't see AJ Green catching 2 touchdown passes. If there's one thing I'm really confident in, is that Denzel Ward will lock him down as he's done throughout his short career here so far.
Okay, I like it. I mean, especially in week 2, I saw that a little bit on the slant routes that we tried to get AJ on that first deep ball play of the game. He's really had some stuff locking up. Actually, one more thing before we bounce away. So, talking about Denzel Ward a little bit, I know you guys drafted Greedy Williams this year. He's been injured. With Denzel Ward, though, and guarding the number ones, has he had success like that against AJ, against every receiver, or has it been a mixture of a little bit this year?
I would say overall he's done a good job. So he doesn't always stick to the number one guy.
Okay.
He kind of rotates. Sometimes he'll stick to one side of the field. Sometimes he'll follow the number one. So it just kind of depends. But I would say overall, when he's on the field, he is a top 10 corner in the league without a doubt. Obviously, he has had some injury problems in the past. But when
Right.
he is healthy, he is a very dominant corner.
Yeah, I see that for sure. He was very dominant in his days at Ohio State, and I'm looking forward to a rematch of that matchup with AJ and him on Sunday. That's going to do it for us here on the Nasty Night Pod. Coach Check, thank you again so much for coming out. I enjoyed our talk, enjoyed our time. Tune into the game on Sunday at 1 o'clock on CBS. Anything you want to take us out with, Jared?
Go Browns.
All righty. Who Day, everyone, thanks for coming out. Thanks for the support. We'll catch you guys after the preview pod, post pod on Sunday. Who Day.